They are the elephant in the room, the giant. What are you expecting from Nvidia after the bell Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, we're expecting another set of good results here, Adam, as far as, Nvidia on the top line. We're looking at north of 50% growth, both here for the July quarter as well as for the October quarter. I think, most important is going to be that guidance and the accelerated sequential acceleration that we expect here for the October quarter. And that's largely going to be dictated by, again, the fact that, we're now kind of well into this Blackwell ramp here, several quarters into it. Nvidia has finally kind of gotten it right. On the supply side of things, there's greater availability. We're seeing greater hyperscaler investments as well. So all of that is going to be a nice boost. Obviously, I think there are really going to be two key factors that could dictate whether or not the stock continues to work, on these results. And the two things that I think you got to look out for is one on the margin side of things. Gross margins is something that the company has kind of alluded to, expanding here as the year progresses. We need to see that, and we need to see them kind of guide, where the street is looking at. So we're talking about, let's call it 73% plus on the gross margin side of things for the October quarter, about 72% here for the July quarter. And then the other thing, obviously, is China, right? What do they have to say about China? What does the China revenue number look like now that they do have approval going into the October quarter? And what do they have to say as far as China trajectory going into next year?
So let's break this down. Let's go with China first, and then let's talk about hyperscaler demand and some specific questions about that. But on China and revenue concentration, even if the H20 shipments resume, how risky is this for Nvidia to rely on a volatile policy environment where one new export rule could erase billions in quarterly revenue again?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the good thing is we're starting off from zero as far as China revenue is concerned on the data center side, right? I mean, in the July quarter, you're essentially looking at no revenue for Nvidia in China for data centers. So it's all upside really from the July quarter. Now, is there a risk if we kind of get to a certain run rate and that run rate isn't sustained and what have you? Absolutely. But for the time being, I think, it's upside as far as China is concerned. China is also the second most important market for the broader accelerator space. So Nvidia needs to participate there. Our view is there's probably going to only be minimal China revenue that, if anything, that Nvidia guides to for the October quarter. When you look at what AMD did just a couple of weeks ago, they essentially put $0 for China in their Q3 forecast. Again, there's a lot of uncertainty just given the trajectory, what what the Chinese government is looking at, how they want to attack kind of the H20 and just broader U.S. investments and what have you. So my view is expect very little from China for the October quarter. Again, more importantly is what Jensen has to potentially say about the China trajectory going into next year. There is speculation.
Okay, let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
Because he's got to address his competition. I mean, Huawei, aren't they catching up? And is it possible that China demand never returns to the levels we saw in the past? And if so, how big a hole is Nvidia facing on its long-term revenue model?
No, all good questions. So, as far as what Nvidia was alluding to, just last quarter, is they said, hey, listen, there was potential $8 billion in revenue, right, in China. Our expectation is, again, potentially a $50 billion market next year. Maybe Nvidia has the potential to catch 30 to 35 billion of that, and potentially even more than that, depending on how far the market grows. And again, we want to hear that from Jensen tomorrow in terms of the potential size and opportunity for Nvidia. A lot of that is going to be dependent on whether or not they get approval to sell their Blackwell chip into China, not the actual kind of supreme Blackwell chip, but a more tempered down, performance laden type of Blackwell chip. We think that will generate a lot of demand. Not to mention, Nvidia also, of course, has that ecosystem. The developers out in China are very familiar with Nvidia's platform. So there's going to be demand there if Nvidia can sell that Blackwell chip out in China. Now, as far as Huawei is concerned, listen, that is a formidable competitor. They don't have the ecosystem that Nvidia has. They don't have the number of developers tied to Nvidia, tied to Huawei that Nvidia does, right? So Nvidia does have an advantage if they can kind of sell into the Chinese government. They are going to see demand as long as, the Chinese government, is okay with that, and the U.S. government allows a Blackwell chip to be, sold into China. A lot of what ifs, though.
So, Angela, how much visibility, when we talk about the hyperscaler demand and the surge in hyperscaler CapEx, how much visibility do you have into whether the demand is sustainable beyond the current Blackwell cycle?
As far as Rubin and Rubin Ultra is concerned, listen, I think more importantly is, what does the demand landscape continue to look like going into next year? I mean, I think these, as long as we continue to see very strong demand for AI agents, I think you're going to see higher spending in 2026. I think the good thing is you are seeing a broadening out of this customer base. That's going to help in case you see a more leveling out in terms of CapEx spend from these, the big four out there. But you kind of look at the trajectory, what all these companies announced just last quarter. I think as long as free cash flow continues to grow for these companies, their underlying business continues to look favorable. I think you'll see higher spend next year. Again, the Rubin jump in terms of performance improvements relative to what you just saw out of Blackwell there is no comparison. It's not going to be anywhere near that. So I wouldn't expect the pickup in demand to be anywhere near what you saw for Blackwell. But there are a lot of benefits to Rubin. And I think Rubin Ultra in 2027-28 is probably the bigger story than Rubin itself.
Do you see a risk of double ordering, once supply bottlenecks ease?
I don't know if I'd say a risk of double ordering. I think, that definitely cycles that you always have to worry about for the semiconductor industry. And I think the question is, when do we got to get to more of a normalized run rate here for CapEx, where you start worrying about cycles and not necessarily the structural secular uplift that you're seeing right now? And my view is you continue to see this run into 2027, 2028, just given what NVIDIA's pipeline looks like, just given the demand trajectory here for more complex reasoning models, and the fact that given the fact that you've got certain customers that are broadening their installed base here over the next kind of 6 to 8 quarters. Again, I don't see a situation where you're going to see a rollover in terms of revenue in terms of CapEx spend for these hyperscalers, but I do see a situation where they potentially look to level off the CapEx spend.